Okay, now we're going to do one final exercise here to bring the session to a close and get some discussion, a little bit of discussion, a little bit of question and answer. So I'd like every person, every individual, so if it's an individual exercise, each person gets a sheet of paper. Hopefully you have a sheet of paper with you, not just an iPad. If you don't have a sheet of paper, please beg or borrow, steal, buy one from your neighbour. Okay, I've got one here, it's $1. Okay, so get a piece of paper. Get a piece of paper, yes? I want to make a little draft, yes. So fold the paper in half and tear it to two pieces. So you have two pieces of paper, like magic, okay? Yeah. Now I've got two pieces of paper. Now, on one piece of paper, please write your main impression or insight to what you've learned, you think, from this session. You could write, well, that was a waste of an hour and a half of my life, I'll never get back. You could write, that was totally awesome. Or you could write something a bit more substantive. It's up to you, okay? On the other piece of paper, write some question or nagging doubt or question you want to ask and don't appear to get a chance to do so. So, one piece of paper, some insights or what you feel about the session. The other piece of paper, a question you have about what you've been discussing in your groups, about what's being proposed. So, one insight, one question. Everyone do this in your group individually. Put them in a big pile in the middle. Don't worry about keeping the insight and the question separate. They should be obvious which is which. What am I doing here might be either, I guess, but most of them obvious. And when everyone in your group's finished and got the pile in the middle, someone in your group stick your hand up, please. The group is the groups that we're just discussing now, so the big groups. So when you've got the big pile in the middle of your group, make a big pile. And someone stick up your hand, please, when everyone in your group is finished, so you know what's going on. If you're finished, you can tap and look annoyed. No, just one pile is fine, because it should be obvious which is which. Have a minute. Doesn't take long. Hurry up. Come on, chop chop. Don't have to fold them over. It's optional. Any group finished yet? I'm going up, no. Get your piles, make a pile somewhere in the middle there. No, don't pass in the front, keep them in your group. Big pile. Yes. That's right, yes. Okay, so apparently in your group you do pass them to the front, yes. Because the pile's at the front. Okay, reach to there, pile them up down here. Okay, once you've done that, you'll be finished now. I want a volunteer from each group to take your pile of papers to a different group and then go back to your group. So pick up your pile of papers, take it to a different group and then go back to your group. Off you go. Take a pile of papers to a different group and then go back to your group. This is not difficult, you can just swap, it's okay. As long as you end up with a different set of papers than the one you started with. So if there's multiple swaps going on, make sure it's different. Has every group now got a different pile of papers? Okay. In your group now, please look at the pile you've got and pick one impression and one question. It has to be from the pile you've got. You can't say, oh, my question was better, this is my question, let's combine these two questions. None of that's allowed. Just pick one impression and one question from the pile you've got in front of you. As a group. As a group. So each group will pick one impression and one question. Pick, whatever method you've learnt, but preferably with some rationale.
We're a methods group now.
Yes, that's the method. Some rationale. You decide.
I've just been elected.
How many votes did I get?
You got 7. It's the way they do things in Chicago.
You count the votes here.
Vote frequently and vote often.
There you go.
Vote often and vote frequently. That was Mayor Daly, wasn't it? The old Mayor, senior Mayor Daly.
Right?
The senior Mayor Daly.
There were a couple of days.
Vote often and vote frequently. Vote early and vote often.
Haven't got fun over there.
You'll have the most fun.
Well, give me another one. That's pretty corrupt.
Yeah.
Including people getting big contributions.
Explicitly, especially.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. I mean, they knew they were the kind of.
So how are you doing? You've got one each. Getting there?
So what's the way out of the big student?
Another 30 seconds. Yes, back to your random assignment, it sounds like.
Democratic credential, yeah.
You're right about that. Just the way.
Okay, 10 seconds. Pick someone from your group who's going to read them out. Someone from your group has to read these two things out.
I thought we missed something.
You've got a volunteer from each group. Each group has a volunteer, please. Yes? Good. Okay, let's go. So, gender-based violent group, please can your volunteer read out the 2 papers you selected. Everyone else pay attention, please.
Shush.
How do we quality assess evidence other than quantitative studies? Thank you. Let's come back and see what else we get. And the second? The impression.
The focus on the causal chain and explanatory factors.
Okay, thank you. The focus on the causal chain and explanatory factors. Let's go to computer-assisted learning.
All right, the question is, how can study quality be weighted or accounted for, I would say in any case, but particularly in gray or non-experimental, etc.
Okay, so
how do you weigh it based on quality?
how do you assess quality, or actually how do you weigh the evidence you include? So it's not just inclusion or not inclusion, it's the weight you give it. Interesting. And the impression?
We did the impression, and the summarizing was that developing a question is a lot more difficult than it seemed, and that there's a lot of work and discussion in generating sub-questions.
A lot of... It's more difficult to get a question. There's the right answer. More difficult question than you expected, and a lot of work in generating sub-questions. Absolutely. Down here, the CCT group.
Is it really practical to have systematic reviews that look at questions/evidence all along the causal chain?
Okay.
And the session was good, but it was a little difficult with time constraints and lack of knowledge. Maybe a work example would have been helpful.
Okay, so is this really practical? And I'd like to see more worked example. Thank you. This group up here, you can stay after, you group, okay? So.
I think another group's already said how to assess the quality of evidence is to be included. And the insight was along the lines of the thinking about the different stages of the causal chain and the theory behind each of them helps you think about, helps the process of coming up with your actual research question.
Okay, causal chain, useful, and assessing quality of evidence. Were you having the same, or you did separately?
No, we have another.
Okay, go ahead.
Things learned, matrix based on how interventions relate to a theory of change as potentially organizing framework for evidence review.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's positive.
It's sort of neutral, but okay.
How do you see the evidence matrix as substantially different from a standard, as if there is such a thing? Coding framework. Not sure I see the essential distinction.
Okay, so how do you see the difference between a standard coding framework and how do you... the first one was, I was using causal chain as a good organising principle. And finally down here?
This is a great framework for expanding your PICO, especially if your sub-questions relate to the PICO question.
Especially, yes.
What are your tips or tricks to scoping a systematic review that is both useful to policymakers and reasonable to complete in a timely way?
Okay, thank you. All right, so this came up, and maybe you got the question from there. So it was pointed out during the discussions that doing this might sound to many people very nice in principle, particularly if you can analyse the columns along the causal chains. It's a logic model or theory-based approach. But is it really possible? Is it really practical? It seems like an awful lot of work. And I would entirely agree, it is a lot of work. So you're doing separate searches. Actually, the search strings might be very similar for the different types of evidence. It's the inclusion criteria that become different. And so when you're looking at different types of evidence. And it is really on a case-by-case basis, we're still finding our way. So with targeting, for example, you need to have a representative sample of the study population, the intervention population, compared to a representative sample of the population as a whole or population in the programme area to know about targeting success or failure. So that's the sort of evidence you might require. Targeting mechanisms, how they work in practice, is much more likely to be qualitative data, and it's qualitative data where we don't have... It's not that there are no inclusion criteria for qualitative data. There are lots of frameworks out there. Birte has a paper in the Special Issue of Journal of Effectiveness on reviews that talks about these different frameworks for assessing qualitative data, but there's not a consensus. When we do effectiveness reviews and we're including quantitative data, there are different standards and risk of bias tools, but we do have something of a consensus. And we don't have the same qualitative consensus. What we tend to use, it's not just about the data, it's about transparency and data collection methods. So you have to know where the data are coming from. They have to state clearly why they went to particular villages they went to, why, or settlements or townships, whatever, why they spoke to the people they spoke to. If you have focus groups, I'm particularly wary of focus groups. You have focus groups, how were the people selected to be in the focus groups, how you can be sure that the reporting of the focus group is an accurate representation of what was said in the focus group, which is all very tricky, in fact, to ensure that. That's why I'm always a bit wary of focus groups. I would be the first to agree there's actually nothing original about this. If you read qualitative synthesis, quantitative analysis handbooks, then you'll find matrices and coding are the core of qualitative methods. But the fact is that most people we've come across in the SR community don't know about these methods, which is great for me because I can go around saying, here, these great ideas I had. And if you go back and look at books written in the 1980s, or probably earlier, if you go back earlier, you'll find this stuff there. So the terminology I'm using of case ordered and concept ordered comes from, actually in this case, from Miles and Huberman, which I think is one of the best books on qualitative analysis. Qualitative Analysis Handbook or something it's called. But these are not new methods. Some of them, like coding, we're more familiar with. Others, like thinking about making a narrative synthesis, we're not so familiar with. So most narrative synthesis that I've seen in reviews basically do what I call football result reporting. If you've got numbers, you have a table, you say, you know, Everton 2, Liverpool 1, Man City 3, Man United 4. You're not interested, okay, in that. What you want to know is who won the cup, who's top of the league, on the big picture. And narrative synthesis I've seen tend to just list the studies one after another. That's not a synthesis, it's a telephone directory. Yeah? So I don't want that, I want a synthesis. I want to know who won the cup. And what we don't have, I think, are clear tools for how we're going to achieve that. And that's what this case-by-case synthesis, the horizontal synthesis, is meant to help you start to do. What I didn't get time to say this morning, really, is what I think this should be done, and we've sort of, and Daniel's been doing this work on targeting, we've sort of started doing, is you take some of the columns and you order by the column and see if you can do subgroup analysis by narrative. So as an example, you might take those programs that targeted women and you reorder the matrix, so you've got all the cases where women is targeted, according to your first column, and see if there's a common narrative structure there across those rows that fall into that subgroup. You might reorder by targeting mechanism. So reorder all the categorical targeting cases together. Are there some common patterns emerging? And what clearly you should be doing, we haven't done that, I think, is you do this sort of analysis, you look for common narratives, and you, of course, 2 people do this, and you want to then say, we've identified 4 stylized narratives, say. Let's go through every case now independently and see if we think it offers strong evidence, no evidence, contrary evidence to that case narrative. As you're looking for ways of systematically summarizing the data. And the problem I've had always with the way evaluators, other researchers use qualitative data, is they cherry pick. Yeah? And so what we want to do is try and find systematic ways of analysing the data so we don't have cherry picking, we have systematic reviews of qualitative data that are truly representative of the evidence in those data. Okay, thank you. So I'm happy to stand here, take any more questions individually, but others are free to go. Thanks.